Welcome to the YouTube channel. And I just came back from a leadership forum conversation where we were talking to Mr. Edward, who at some point led SARS and had a massive, massive turnaround in that space. And he's a brilliant, brilliant communicator. And I just quickly wanted to document right now some of the things that I think he does so brilliantly, some of the techniques that he made use of, and some of the things that he intentionally did to make him an even more powerful communicator. So the first thing that he did off the bat was to refer to everybody by their names. Now, granted that in the forum, we always have our names in front of us. There's like a little placard that has our names there. But the fact that he made it a point to refer to people by their names, Tabani, and I want to make up some fictitious names now just to make the example. So let's say you asked him a question about what are the key things that you thought about when trying to turn the organization around or try to move this big ship that's SARS, and what are some of the things that you put into place? So let's say Johnny asked that question. His response would be, it's a very important question, Johnny. And I first want to highlight that it wasn't easy. And I want to highlight that even in how much I dedicated myself, it wasn't done alone. So Johnny, maybe let me talk you through. So he mentioned the person's name as he's talking to the individual is the first thing that he did incredibly well. Mentioning people's names as you're speaking to them, as you're responding to their question, will always make you a more powerful communicator than just talking about the answer that you have already. So if you're in an interview, if you're in a conversation, if you're in a forum, if you're on a panel, think about mentioning the people by name as they're having the conversation with you. And if you happen to be in a panel discussion, let's say I'm sitting with Johnny and Cindy, so fictitious names again. Johnny, thanks for that question. I want to arc us back to what Cindy was saying earlier on, and thanks, Cindy, for that wonderful contribution. What Cindy said, and just consistently mentioning people's names. What that does, not only does it make you a powerful communicator, but also it makes the person whose name you're mentioning feel a bit good. Right? They say one of the people's favorite words in any language is hearing the sound of their name. Granted that it's not associated to any malintention or trouble or anything that's going to bring them negative or unfavorable results. But if you're mentioning someone's name, it creates something and somewhat of a connection in people's hearts. The second thing that I noticed that he did incredibly well was as he was responding to the question. So let's say he's responding to Johnny's question again, as opposed to looking at Johnny the whole time, he addressed the whole room. As he spoke to all of us and didn't just respond to Johnny. He spent most of his time with Johnny, which he intentionally does. And he mentioned that when you tell stories, to close the gap between yourself and the person you're telling the story to, you want to make sure that you dedicate all of your time, your attention, and your energy to that person. So he's a big one-on-one guy, big personal relationship guy, big personalization guy. So he intentionally tries to focus his attention on the one person he's speaking to, but that's not without him looking and addressing the entirety of the room while he's doing that. Of course, if he feels like the question that he's addressing or the answer he's giving speaks to the person directionally or more directly, then he'll address it directly to the individual. And if he feels like it's something that's going to be applicable for everyone in the room, then he'll address it to the entire room. Something he did incredibly well, looking not only at the individual, but also at the entire room. And the third thing that he did well was he didn't give simple answers. And by simple answers, there was not a single one-word answer that he gave. He elaborated on a lot of the stuff that he thought about, he spoke about, and it was clear that he'd already thought about a lot of the stuff that he spoke about. Yes, there were some things that when he spoke about them, it was evident that he was applying his mind in the moment, and he actually did something to reflect that. He said, "That's an interesting question. I haven't thought about that much, so allow me to think while I give this answer." And of course, the rest of us bought in to that. But you found that as he shared, at the very least, he always had 2 points. So it's the first thing I want to share about this. And secondly, I would say this. And maybe thirdly, to close off, or he'd say thirdly. And he also had beautiful models, like this 3-step model I want to talk about, this 4-step model I want to talk about. So if you want to make yourself sound a lot more put together, structure your thoughts, sound more confident, and land a message in a potent and a powerful way, don't just give one-word answers. One-word answers, in my view, are the killer of credibility, because all it shows is one, and look at me, count through the answers again. One, the answer you're giving is either something I haven't thought about before, or you're giving an answer just to give an answer. You're not giving an answer to provide context. You're not giving an answer that's well thought out. You're not giving an answer of one that has applied themselves to the question. And then perhaps the thing that you don't notice when you give a one-word answer, it then infers something about how you think. And most times, how we speak says something about how we think. How we speak says something about how we navigate the world. And if you're just giving one-word answers, then it says that this person indirectly, you're not saying this directly, but this is what we infer as the people that are listening to you. This person has a single view through which they view the world. They can't think about a problem from different areas and consider different perspectives. And they actually can't think about problems and the complexity of them. There are very few things on God's green earth that have one-word answers. The answer is always nuanced, complex, dependent on certain context, factors, contributors, detractors. There's always something around any answer that's of meaningful consideration. So consider not just giving one-word answers or giving a answer as though it's the only answer. Always acknowledge alternatives or frame the context within which you're giving the answer, and then give the answer that's narrowed. But frame the context, at least give us the view that you've thought about some of the things that you're talking about. So that was just a quick thought that I wanted to share around just feeling fired up, hearing a phenomenal speaker share his thoughts, his views, and of course, even a better leader, stronger leader. He spoke a lot about culture. He spoke a lot about turning organizations around, not just culturally, but also changing the moral fabric of the people that are in those organizations. And he shared quite intimately and quite directly how he achieves that. He highlighted trust as an anchor to turning organizations around, turning people around. And then he also, side by side, highlighting trust, spoke about the importance of just one-on-one relationships and making people feel seen, heard, valued, and to show them that as a leader, you're not just coming to achieve objectives or to meet the bottom line. You're also here to foster a sense of meaning and purpose and instill a sense of purpose in people's lives. But from the communication perspective, the first thing that he does extremely well as he gives answers, one, he addresses people by their name, which personalizes his messages. And then two, he looks around the whole room. He addresses the entire room as opposed to just speaking to the person. Of course, when he's talking about the things that practically or that personally apply to the person, he'll then directly look at that individual. But he looks at the whole room for the most part. And then the third point that he does extraordinarily well is just his ability to flesh things out and his ability to acknowledge nuance and complexity in situations. And a phrase he actually used to anchor this was, Tabani, I'm not going to give you a textbook answer. And for me, that just stuck with me. I was like, man, this is somebody who understands that when I ask a question, how do you approach A? How do you approach B? How do you approach C? Of course, I'm looking for a formula. Of course, I'm looking for a stochastic textbook answer that's going to be the silver bullet. But he often said things like, I'm not going to give you the textbook answer. Or he'll say things like, there isn't a silver bullet for this thing. It's complex and it's got multiple factors, but this is what I'll give you for your consideration, for you to chew on and to think about. So I quickly wanted to share those quick communication tips for you to consider when you're communicating. I think there's a lot that goes into communication. And of course, this is what this channel is about. And that's what I'll be speaking about for the most part. And I wanted to share just some lessons that I just learned not so long ago. I mean, it hasn't even been an hour. An hour. Okay, maybe it has been an hour since we've been together, but I wrote down the notes. I thought I'm going to quickly come home and make a video about this and share this with you all. And with that said, if you've got any questions, thoughts, contributions, comments, pop them in the comment section below. And I'd love to engage with some of you to hear what some of your thoughts are around these 3 core lessons to communicate like a leader.